I never get tired of making toys. They're fun to make, and you know that some child or some children are going to have fun playing with them once they're received. This project is going to be for a Washington State Ferry. I've been out to Washington, although I did not see these. I went directly from the Seattle-Tacoma Airport to Fort Lewis, Washington. I was at Fort Lewis, Washington for 17 days, waiting for a flight to Vietnam. I've made this before, and I'm making some now because I sold the last one yesterday. When I make something over again, and there's simple parts to it, I usually do this, and I will take some Masonite and make a Masonite pattern. This way, instead of having to print out the pattern every time and attach it to the wood, all I have to do is take this Masonite pattern and lay it on the wood and trace it out directly. These are all 3/4 inch parts. There's the bottom to the boat and then some of the other parts. There's one part, only 2 for each boat of the sides. Those are 1/2 inch thick. There are several 1/4 inch thick pieces. Again, these are all simple shapes, easy to trace. The only thing I didn't make patterns, Masonite patterns for, are the cars. There are 3 cars. So there's 3 cars and there's the fenders for each. I probably could make Masonite patterns for them. They're not all that complicated, but it only takes a few sheets of paper to make these. So I just print out the patterns for things like cars. Put an 1/8 inch drill bit in here. Need pilot holes for the wheel, for the windows for these cars. I was using backer board, keep from getting tear out on the back, although in a case like this it really doesn't matter too much because I'm going to be cutting all around it anyway for the window, but it's just as good to be in the habit, and you need something like this thing anyway. So there's one window in one car and 2 in the other. The pattern here calls for 1/4 inch holes for the axles, but I'm not going to be using axle pegs on these. I just prefer using 1/4 inch dowel rod for an axle all the way through. Obviously, if I'm using a 1/4 inch dowel rod, I'm going to need a larger hole for the axle than a 1/4 inch. If it's going to spin freely, I generally use a 5/16. This jet drill press has a laser sight on it, so I know exactly where the hole is going to be. That's it, those are ready. Ready to go to the scroll saw. The 2 biggest parts for the ferry boats are the hull, and those are about 7.5 wide by 17 and 7/8, so about 18 long. So I marked off a piece of red oak here. It is 10 inches wide, and I marked 36, so let me cut that. So I'm going to take it to the table saw. Both edges are pretty rough on this, so I'm going to take it to the table saw, rip it to, well, I'll rip one side smooth, and then I'll rip it to the 7.5. I set the rip fence for just a little bit under 10 inches wide. Now I'm going to take it to the thickness planer. Get down to 7/8. The sides are smooth. I'm going to rip this to the 7.5 width, and then I'll run the rest of it through down to 3/4 for the extra parts. This is my PS wood scroll saw. A couple things I like about it. It's got a deep throat, but it's also got a deeper distance between the front of the table and the blade. That comes in handy sometimes. here, where you've got a long piece, use that to cut. I took this original piece, it was 10 inches wide, I think. It was 10 inches and 7.5 for the hull for the ship. I kept that at about 7/8. I just planed it down enough to take the roughness out of it. And I took the additional 2.5 inches that was left and planed that down to 3/4 because I need some pieces that are 3/4. I would rate this as a beginner project, really. There's no difficult cuts. These are the little gates that will be at each end of the ferry, and 3/4 material. I'm using oak. You can use whatever you like. You could do it in copper and paint. I recommend a hardwood though, not a softwood. So that's what one of those looks like. Now, you could get actually a little bit of practice here, which would be good, at cutting 90 degrees, because there's these cutouts. I'll cut one side and I'll cut the other. Then I will make this 90-degree turn and make the cut from one to the other. So that would be a good place to practice that. And the way you do it is you make the first cut on one side, make the cut on the other. And when you get to the place where you need to make the 90, you actually back off with the blade so it's not cutting. When you got enough room there to make the turn the blade 90 degrees, and that's it. There's your 90-degree turn. Or you could do it if you're brand new to stroke farm. You could make a cut on one side, make a cut on the other, and then go like partway at that, glancing at it on an angle, cut that much out, and then go back and finish the cut from this side. Easy enough to do on this one, but I would highly recommend, if this is not a perfect 90, it's not going to be all that noticeable. In fact, if you want to make a little repair to the cylinder, that would be fine too. But this would be a good place to learn how to do those 90s, because you're sooner or later going to have a project where you want to do 90-degree turns. So this would be a good place to practice. The cars are cut from 1.5-inch thick material. If you remember, I'm making them out of poplar because poplar takes paint nicely. Now this top car here, you'll notice the cutout here for the window, for the windshield, and then for the back window, and they're kind of a steep little cut. So I think what I'm going to do on those is I'm going to start this one here at the front. It will end up with a rough spot right there where I entered, because when I come around with the end it, where the blade is, and there's an exit to it with a little bit of a rough spot. really can't handle 1.5 inches. This is a PS wood saw, and it easily handles 1.5 inches. In fact, I think I've done 2-inch to 8/4 on this. So I'm in the far stretch here, coming around, almost back to the front. Kind of looks funny through the magnifier there, doesn't it? But you can see the windshield there, and I went around it, and now I can go back in and cut just that part out, and the same thing for the rear window, and there'll be a little bit of it'll be a sharper corner there, and you can also see here, I believe, the rough spot where I entered and I exited. You always get that. That's why if I can, I will start at an angle, but this doesn't have any. So anyway, that's that's a little tip on cutting curves and getting. I could have done it, gone here, made the curve and come out again, but it's some pretty tight curves, and doing that with a number 12 blade is not easy. So I'm going to cut the windshield and the back window, and then I'll feed the blade through the pilot hole and cut out the window. I've got the fenders glued on the cars. Now I can start a little assembly on the ferry itself. Did a little measuring. Got the place where this needs to go. Put some glue on the bottom there. Alright, time to put a little glue on the pieces, the sides here for the ferry boat itself. It's going to be obviously the same edge from the same distance from each end, the bow and the stern, although I'm not sure if those really apply on a ferry boat because I think they go either direction. Never been on one, I've seen them. Alright, and I want this in 3/4 of an inch from the outside. Now I'll do the same with the other side. Now the top goes right on here, and I might as well put that on. So just put a little bit of glue on each one of these little sections here. Those would be windows. And spread them around a little bit by hand. This is water-based glue, so get a little bit on your fingers, no big deal. Just wipe it off with a rag. And if you're like me, you got clothes you wear only in the shop, so wipe them on the side of your jeans is no big deal either. And then put the top on here. I want it, let's see if we're equidistant from either side. Looks like it. It's not a lot of overlap there. There's about a 1/4 inch. Yeah, that's the same on both. Alright, that's good. And I just need some pressure on that. In fact, I think sometimes clamps on something like this are a pain. I buy my glue by the gallon. We'll put that on top. That gives quite a bit of, that gives some weight. And that's all we need is that downward pressure to let that glue dry for a while. The next to the last step for the cars is going to be to paint them. Made one of the cars red, one yellow, one blue. In the past, I'm going to stick with the same idea. One of the main reasons why is, well, those are good colors, but the other reason is that they're shown on my website, and those are the pictures that's shown in the photos. And if I do the next set in a different set of colors, then I've got to update the photos on the website, and I don't particularly want to have to do that if I can avoid it. So this would be, I wouldn't even want to think of doing this with a brush. The light spray, go past. The ferry boat is complete. The gates open like this, but the red one looks good, the blue one looks good, and that's the way they would go on the boat. The gates close. There you go. Nice little project. Nothing really difficult. There's a couple inside cuts for windows on the blue van. Those are the only inside cuts, and there's no complicated glue ups. There's nothing complicated about it at all. The only thing is you'll need some 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch thick stock. Anyway, it was a fun project. I made 2 of them. I usually make these things in batches. I sold the last one not too long ago, so I've replaced them both now, and I'll be able to put them back in stock and hopefully sell them soon so I can make more. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Please comment if you have something you'd like to say, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more project videos like this.